Quentin was not always a priestess. Once she was a girl. Once she was awakened by her mother's sweating hand in the early morning hours. Quentin opened her eyes and saw her mother in shadow, lip-licking a smile to the fore. It was terrifying. "Quentin, dear, you've got to wake up now." The well-loved blue blanket slipped from Quentin's bare shoulders, exposed her yet child chest. Chill waked her. Quentin looked around the tiny room for clothing. Her mother always set out her clothing. Her father couldn't be bothered to, but this morning the clothing wasn't. She knew fear. Her mother produced a bucket and a thing and another thing. "Mother, are we going to the baths?" "No, dear. We'll do this right here." Right here in the house? Did that mean she was a woman now? Her mother did not answer her with words, but soon Quentin was face down and nude and being scraped cleaner than she'd ever been. There would be no stray hairs, no trace of fuzz. Back, arms, legs, shoulders, neck, butt, all tugged at by the razor. Sometimes it hurt. She turned over, and there was more shaving and scraping, the cold air magnifying each little hurt into something huge and ponderous, the little hairs between knuckle and joint, each finger carefully examined, tended to. Young Quentin drew a vertiginous breath when the tweezers came out, foraged for some hint on her mother's face that she didn't really mean it, that this couldn't really happen. "Close your eyes." Quentin did, and one by one her eyelashes were pulled from their lids. She mewed. Snot blocked her nose, but it happened. Her mother made it happen. Her eyebrows were much easier, though they took much longer. Quentin was bathed, drizzled on, then rubbed down hard, dried, buffed. "Quentin, dear, it is time. Come now. Cry if you must, but come." Quentin couldn't rise. Her mother walked away, and Quentin rose and followed as surely as though the umbilical still held, a cord quite knotted by the morning's inscrutable, not quite horror, not quite torture, knotted and frayed, but it held. Quentin walked naked down the street. Everyone could see her. She tried to cover herself with her hands. The temple was huge and smelled of spoiled fruit, dizzyingly over-sweet. The corners of each stone made perfect right angles. Each step was precisely 2 centimeters too high to be comfortable for the mortified, naked young girl. She climbed them a half-second behind her mother's bobbing shadow. "This is my daughter, my only daughter, my daughter whom I love. Look how I have prepared her. Look for a flaw. Look for a flaw. I have brought her here before you, naked as the moment of her birth, shorn and shining." Quentin's eyes rolled this way and that. Her breath came in bursts, roaring in her ears. She tried not to breathe. She had to hear. This was danger. This was danger, and her mother was not protecting her from the danger. This was danger, and her mother was leading her deeper and deeper into the danger, and if she didn't stop soon, then she would be in too deep, and Quentin would never, ever kick her way to the surface again, and she would drown in it, gasping, and she couldn't hold her breath anymore. She couldn't! So she did gasp, and one of the women, an old one, looked at her like a sledgehammer looks at a stake, and Quentin felt like she was dying, would die for sure, but she didn't. "This is my daughter, my only daughter, my daughter whom I love, and I am her mother, her only mother. Look how I have prepared myself." And there was Quentin's mother, naked and hairless across every bit of her body, every bit, and not so red and raw as Quentin. She was herself in all ways, except that now her eyelashes and those little hairs in her nose and her ears were as gone as though they'd never been. "Your daughter?" "My daughter." "She is our daughter now." "Yes." "No!" And little Quentin screamed no again and again, and it came out of a place somewhere far below her feet, and flung itself through her body, and pitched out across the lavishly appointed apartments, and bounced and rang, and was quite entirely ignored by all present, except for her mother, who turned ever so slightly, and that set Quentin off again in shrieking hiccups of "Mom! Mom! Mom!" But her mother's attention was back on the women and off of her daughter, and she walked forward away from her daughter, and her knees did not buckle, and she did not lose the thread of it or the threat of it, and she accepted it all and was accepted. She died, of course. Quentin watched it happen and was helpless, and then she was taken, and no notice was ever taken of her tears or her cries or her demands or her desperation or the broken parts rubbing themselves to rust and metal shavings inside. Parts of her mother decorated the pyramid for weeks. Proof that she'd been an exemplary woman.